So welcome everyone to this future-proof container terminals episode. Today we got a really interesting guest, Gunjan Syal, these days leading GoEmerald as founder and chief strategy advisor. And especially these days that we're hearing more about digital transformation, all these changes due to the global pandemic, it's really important for us. How important is the role of data? How data is changing our way of working, and how can we benefit from data? So with that being said, Gunjan, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Chris. I know you and I have been talking probably for about an year and a half now, and it's so exciting to be here having a formal conversation and share with people some of the conversations you and I have been having offline. Thank you for having me.
That's great, Gunjan, and I am really excited to hear about your thoughts regarding data and all your experiences you are constantly getting together with your customers. So,
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So before starting the hardcore questions, Gunjan, the plan for today is that we have been putting together some questions, not only from my side but also based on your experiences, and the plan is to go through them and just feel free to share your lesson learned, experiences, and thoughts. So if that's okay for you, let's go for it.
Absolutely. Let's get ahead.
Great. So Gunjan, for those who haven't got the chance to meet you yet, could you share a little bit more about who is Gunjan?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So I'm basically known as Gunjan from GoEmerald. I have 15 years of experience delivering digital transformations for 27 clients in 9 industries. GoEmerald is basically a data-obsessed transformation innovation consulting firm. And basically, we focus on delivering high ROI innovation and transformations for clients these days. So that's consultant speak for I solve really, really complicated business problems with strategy, data, and technology these days in such a way that the end result is visible, measurable, and repeatable. I also host Global TED Circle conversations, which is really very near and dear to my heart because I'm very passionate about inclusive innovation. And it's always amazing to me to hear point of views from different parts of the world, how they relate to each other, and also sometimes how they differ based on the lifestyles and the challenges people have in different parts of the world.
Awesome, Gunjan. And I can also share that I got like common passions together with you, and I am one of your frequent users.
Absolutely, and it's always a pleasure to have you, Chris.
Great. And Gunjan, you mentioned a lot of stuff about the digital transformation, data, but I always like to ask this question. So how would you describe the role of data on digital transformation?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question, Chris. So sometimes we get too hung up on specific uses of data within a company, right? But it's so much more than that. The overall role of data in a digital transformation actually is to be that decision driver. And that's how I take data to be. So if we can identify what are the driving forces behind that digital transformation, measure them, and drive behavior and changes that we're making in our company using that data, that's the role of data for me in that digital transformation world. So it's more than one word, but decision driver.
Yeah, I can understand that it's quite tricky to define in one word, because when we talk about data, we are touching different aspects of many elements here. But and Gunjan, I would like also to understand a little bit more, why do we need to focus on data now and not in the future?
Right, that's a great question, Chris. So from my point of view, there's the way we have approached digital transformation and business in past versus now, the big difference is using data to make decisions and not intuition, right? The reason for that is we talked about how many times and how many different types of changes we have seen due to pandemic in the customer preferences, in the economic world, in many different factors that affect a business. It's impossible for any one person to sit down and have that intuition in their gut and be making those decisions, right? And in a larger company, in a larger organization that's going through transformation, you can't have any set of people that have that intuition. So the only way to do that is by collecting data to understand what's happening in the market, what's happening inside our business, what are our customers looking for, what's happening at the local level versus global levels, right? I could give you one simple example. If you even think about the way that our governments and our stakeholders are controlling the whole pandemic situation right now, right? The way that the policy is being designed, it's all based on data, isn't it? The COVID tracing apps that we talked about, there's a lot of privacy type conversations there as well. But if you don't have data, how are you going to make those decisions, right? How would you safeguard the public? So these are all the reasons why data has so much more focus on it now and is forming a foundational backbone, if you will, for how you run your business, how you may run your country for that matter as a leader, right?
Yeah, and I am totally aligned with you, and especially, well, I am involved in the maritime industry with the terminals, and especially for operations, you need real-time data. You need quality data. It's not only generating data and storing data. It's how do you make this data visible and useful at the right time. So it's really interesting, all this topic around data. And Gunjan, you have been leading GoEmerald these days, before the pandemic, through the pandemic, let's say almost post-pandemic. What is your why at GoEmerald? What is your purpose of
right? So that's a great question, right? So let me put this in context of a digital transformation itself, which is what we do. So the way that at GoEmerald and our customers approach digital transformation in past would have been through alignment of people, process, technology, right? And I know, Chris, you and I have had many conversations about that. What does that mean in terms of process, people, technology? Because oftentimes people tend to focus more on the technology piece of digital transformation. And in past, we've had problems aligning processes and people and the stakeholders outside of that technology team to it. But what's happened during pandemic is data, almost you can think of it like a layer around people, process, technology, right? If you don't have data available, how are you actually going to build that alignment? So these days, GoEmerald is much more focused on the data side, enabling that as well. Along with that comes public policy and regulations, right? So if you think about, for example, the terminals, right? Airports, let's talk about them for a second. How their business was impacted during pandemic, right? Flights were shut down. Regulations had to be placed on who can get on a flight and who can't. And it's not just the airport that can design that, but the policymakers, the people, then a lot of number of different stakeholders have to come together to make that happen. So when I look at the why of GoEmerald post-pandemic, it's still to enable those digital transformations, still to make companies more innovative. But now the focus is, let's say one layer is people, process, technology, with data wrapper around it, and with focus on public policy and regulations to ensure the inclusion, the equity, the safety, all of those different factors that are needed to make society more productive for everyone, right? And for businesses and their customers.
Yeah, in one word, it's like an ecosystem,
Absolutely.
That need to be now totally communicated to get, so everyone can get the benefit of this data. And, I'm really passionate about these people, process, and technology, because it's like you need to find the perfect balance between especially people and technology these days, because it's also on my day-to-day that even though you got a state-of-the-art technology in your terminal, you need people to manage.
So that's a very interesting point, Chris. And if I may add something to it, right? The way that I think about technology now is garbage in, garbage out, to your point. If your people process, data aside and public policy aside, if those two elements are not aligned, you are going to use certain assumptions and some constraints to design that technology solutions. And you are going to have a whole ton of unintended consequences at the end of that. And you won't even know what those risks are or what those, the impact, if you will, of it is going to be if you don't pay attention to all these different 5 factors that we've talked about, right? People, process, technology, data, and public policy. If you're not watching them all at the same time, there's a risk right there to your business, to your customers, to overall society, right?
That's right. And that links me to my next question, Gunjan. As a chief strategy advisor, I am aware you are involved in so many industries, but could you share a little bit more about what are the main challenges you're facing, not only within your team, but also together with your customers?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question, right? So, as you said, if I ignore the industries, if I ignore even geographical boundaries for a second, one fact that's very true, no matter whether you are a nonprofit or a for-profit company or even a government, you have data in some shape or form, whether you're using it or not, right? Whether you're even tracing it or not. Even if it's on a piece of paper, it's still data, still information. So all that data flows like a river through your company, right? And in past, we haven't been as cognizant about what that means, right? We have different departments with different mandates, with different objectives, but it's not really connected. So post-pandemic, there's a lot of need to take all those things and build this alignment and more importantly, stay aligned. And that's very, very complex. So it actually starts with understanding what the stakeholders are. Who are they, I should say? What are their needs? Why are they touching that data? Why do they need that data, right? What is the series of complex changes that are happening to that data? So following that journey as opposed to looking at it piecemeal. So that's where it's very important to define the overall data strategy. Why do you need it? When do you need it? Who will benefit from it? Some of those type of things. And then figuring out how to break down those data silos, right? Oftentimes, people get too hung up on data silos and lose sight of the data strategy. So I always have to go back and remind people, and sometimes even myself, right? You get so focused on solving one particular problem, you don't want to lose the sight of the forest because you're focused on this one tree at the moment. So how do you build that alignment then as well? Overall, when I look at it, data governance, which is all about ensuring once you have made those changes, let's say successfully, how will you effectively manage the way that you're using data to drive decisions in your company? Ultimately, that's the goal, right? And this is where some standards, some policies, whether they're internal or external to your company, some constraints that come into place to ultimately use data as an asset for your company instead of a particular department owning it. And a lot of data literacy goes along with that as well. So I know I threw out a lot of bunch of buzzwords in there, but essentially, if you think about how you're defining data strategy to break down those data silos and how you're linking that to the data governance you need in place after you have actually accomplished that successfully, because it's not a project, right? So very much of a product conversation. Data needs to be a product within your company. How would you leverage that? How will you teach people how to use it? There would be times when you make changes to it, right? Because something else has changed. How will all of that happen?
Really interesting, and I can feel your passion here. And Gunjan, for me, supporting customers on eco-efficiency journeys or automation journeys, the difference between success and failure is change management. So how would you describe the role of change management in a digital transformation, for example?
Right. So the way that I equate change management, people may agree or disagree. The change management for data is data governance, to be very honest with you. And usually in organizations, there would be certain teams that are tasked with data governance. I would say 80% of that team's job in the beginning is nothing more than change management, right? And that means aligning your stakeholders. That means understanding through that transformation journey. Challenging part is that even your stakeholders' roles are changing, right? So how will you actually work with them while your own role is changing, while their role is changing and the company itself is changing? Is a very challenging task. So even building alignment and data literacy plans within that data governance team, it's nothing short of change management over.
And Gunjan, you mentioned already quite many times the word silos. Could you that's like a cliche, like asking you what is a silo, but could you describe what is a silo? What is the main? Why does this generate? How can we avoid silos?
Question, Chris, and very, very near and dear to my heart, actually. So let's take a step back and look at how this problem happened in the first place, right? So data silo essentially means that one part of the company or one department has access to certain data that others may not even know about, right? Or maybe they know about it, but they don't have access to it somehow. So it's at the core of it, an access problem, right, to the data. Sometimes it may actually be that the data is replicated in 2 or 3 different places, and that's an issue now, right? Which leads to data quality issues. So how does that happen in the first place? It's very important to understand that before we can actually think about solving that problem. So in most organizations, they're very projectized, right? So they would say, okay, well, let's deploy this application on a digital transformation, or look at this part of the business from an operations perspective because there's more efficiencies needed there. Let's take terminals as an example, right? You may be making changes to baggage claim, let's say. Now, apart from the hardware and the stuff that you actually see in an airport, there's a lot of systems, a lot of processes behind the scenes, correct? You know more about it than I do about this stuff, right? Being part of that terminals world. Now, if you're going to do siloed projects, they all have a start and an end, right? So you've been given a mandate, go and solve this problem. You are going to make certain decisions and you are going to make certain assumptions to accomplish that project, which other people outside of that team may or may not be aware of, right? That's the problem with projects. And that's, you do that times 100, times 1,000 times, which a lot of companies have done, right? Over time, you need to do a lot of projects that are focused with certain goals in mind. But the side effect of that is that you're ending up with data that's tied to some applications, some systems, some infrastructure, whatever have you, right? And that goes the same with people, process, tech decisions, right? You've made certain decisions. So there's a lot of tech debt, and along with that comes in data debt, right? And that's how you end up with data silos. So I hope that gives you some perspective of how this problem happens in the first place, and maybe even some thoughts around how to overcome them. So you can't really, in my opinion, run digital transformations as projects anymore. You need to think of them very much like a product, right? That's going to live and breathe. So when you're building a product, you're building features and certain things on top of it, but they're all aligned to a certain goal or a certain product, right? Certain foundational thing. What is that thing? Because data is not really an entity you can look at as a part of an application or a team even. It needs to really come together.
Yeah, really, really clear explanation here about how to overcome silos, and that's why I truly believe that we need to create this ecosystem where data can navigate through all the ecosystem and everyone can benefit from data. Absolutely. It's not like, okay, this is my data, I will not share, because we are basically closing the door of all the benefit that data can add value to all our day-to-day operations, especially.
Yeah, and I'll just point out one last thing on that topic, right? The importance of processes when breaking down data silos. A lot of the times people get very focused on the systems, but we forget about the business rules that are implemented by, whether it's an automated process or a manual process, right? There's something happening. That data is being processed when it's traveling from, let's say, one system or one particular part of the organization to another, right? We put so much focus on these systems because they're tangible things. We don't think about the process and how that may need to change too much, because a lot of the times data silos come up because as people, we get very cautious of not sharing data unless I have completed my job, right? I don't want to share something half built with Chris, or the job is only half done. I haven't gone through the entire process of processing that data and giving you the final outcome. But what that's doing is, to your stakeholder, it's not giving that full picture, right? Data should be an open entity inside a company, right? With privacy concerns and some of those standards and policies aside, the access of the data should be an open thing. In fact, it reminds me of a situation. I don't know how long ago that was, or maybe I read it in a book or I read an article, but the founder of Amazon, right, Jeff Bezos, at one time wrote a memo inside his company earlier on and sent it to everybody and said, well, you need to open up APIs to have people inside the company in other parts of the organization get access to the data and get access to the functionality that you're building, because he did not want those silos. So people were forced to do their work in such a way that at the end product, whatever they design, whatever they build, it will be accessible to the rest of the company. And it's such a great way to think about breaking down silos ahead of the time, as opposed to building something and saying, okay, now how do I make it accessible, right?
Really, really interesting. And, when thinking on the terminal environment or the ecosystem, you got sales, operation, and the technical team, and maintenance, IT, and yeah, there is, as you may know, the terminal data is generated, heavily. So it is critical that we got all this data shared through all departments, so we can have like a better decision making. So it's really, really
and it
important.
becomes very complex if you think about it in that particular scenario, right? Think about the privacy concerns that may be there when that data is traveling, the security concerns, what happens to data quality, because as it's traveling, it's collecting more and more attributes, right, along with it.
That's right.
So think about even your own experience as walking into a terminal, right? Traveling through the security gate, getting your ticket validated, walking over to the gate, figuring out what you're going to do, doing some other activities if you have time before you get on a plane. So if you even think about that experience, quite complex experience, right? So it only scratches the surface of how complex people's jobs are, people like yourself.
Yeah, I can say that quite many of my colleagues will define terminals as a complex operation, but I can say it's not only due to the nature of the operation, but also due to the challenging times we are also facing. But not only the maritime industry, many others industries. So
absolutely. And that's where policies come in, right? Regulations and policy changes, because as a business, if you're not aware of them, what constraints you need to watch, right? It's not just up to the leadership, right? It's up to every single team, even yourself. When you're advising your clients, if you're advising on the design and you're not taking that into consideration, that won't help them. So you have to be watching that data and watching certain type of factors that are changing all around us.
Awesome, Gunjan. And we have talked about the importance of data, why we should avoid silos. But Gunjan, for a company that is not a data-driven company, and how should they start all this journey?
It's a great question, actually, Chris. It can be very overwhelming, right? To think about going from a 0 to 100. Right? You can't just say, okay, today I'm a data-driven company. Let me think in terms of data, collect all the data that I need and start using it to make decisions. I think that's actually the wrong way to do it. The first thing you need is actually a vision, right? And in order to inform some of these conversations and help make it less overwhelming, if you will, at GoEmerald, we've actually started a data-driven workshop series to cover some of these topics. So every month, sort of handling a little piece of it and helping our customers through that. So as a starting point, I can share some very, very high level thoughts, right? That don't even begin to scratch the surface of some of the complexities that are around this, but it would help bring the teams that step-by-step approach, if you will, how to start instituting that data-driven culture, if you will, right? It's a culture that you're changing. Being more aware, first of all, of how you currently make decisions is very important, right? Are you already using certain types of facts and data as your basis? Where is that data coming from? What are you actually relying on? That would give you a good baseline, right? It would also, in turn, help you think about what assumptions and constraints you may have in place, right? Taking that different point of view to say, so I'm making this particular unsaid assumptions. Is that really true across the company? Or is this particular department making different assumptions than that other one? Because it would be very difficult to have that alignment conversation or even identify data that these two teams can use to work together if those assumptions and constraints are not aligned, right, in the decision-making process. And then when you look at the two things that I just mentioned, being aware of how you make decisions and questioning your assumptions and constraints, once you have done that, you would get a really good sense of where you are as far as data maturity level is concerned in your company. So I like to use two words here. One is called data produce, right? And the other one is data use. So every company is a data produce company, right? If you're selling something, you're a data produce company. But are you doing something with that data? That'll make you a data use company. Once you've defined yourself as a data use company, what is your goal and objective? Why do you even need the data? Because a lot of the times we get so hung up on a mandate that some leader may come up with in a company, right? They may say, well, I want to make my company data-driven company. Well, why is that? Why do you even need data to make those decisions? How will your customer benefit from this? How will your company benefit? How will your partners benefit? As you said earlier, how will the entire ecosystem benefit? That vision needs to be really, really very specific. It's really just very crystal clear about what objectives you're marching towards.
Great, Gunjan, and we're almost reaching an end here, but I would like to close with I would like to hear your thoughts regarding this one. And for me, when evaluating the different level of automation, something that I may see in the market is that sometimes customers are seeing that their neighbors are already automating, and they got this feeling that, I need to automate as soon as possible. And probably they will try to copy paste the neighbor solution, and I think that's a big mistake. The baseline is to understand your way of working and what will be the level of automation that will match your operational KPIs, and many other KPIs. So I can expect it's the same for you, right, on the digital transformation.
Absolutely, right. There's no such thing as a copy paste, right? I mean, the way that one retail company would use their data is very different from what the other company would use. And that's all based on how are your customers thinking about it, right? They may be fighting over the same customer. Sometimes you may even be offering the same product, but that doesn't mean that you are the same company. If you were, then every company under the sun in a particular industry would look exactly the same, right? It's so much more, as you said, about the culture of the company, how you work, the ways of working as you described, the customers that you're, the experience, if you will, right, is the right way to put it, that you're trying to provide your customer. The data strategy has to be very, very aligned to that. And digital transformation, for that matter, and the innovation strategy as well, right? All of these things are intertwined, and that's where the complexity comes from. But that's where we were talking about vision earlier. It's so important for leaders to take accountability of what that vision needs to look like, listen to other people in the company, try to build alignment around what that looks like, right? Nobody would be 100% of the time aligned to it. I hate to say it, but that's where you have to make some tough decisions as a leader, right? That's your job ultimately. How are you going to build that new way of working inside your company? What would be your competitive advantage in the new world, right? In the post-pandemic world.
Great, Gunjan, and it is really interesting. Every time I had some time to discuss with you, I am constantly learning from experiences.
And same here, Chris. Same here. That's the point of these conversations, right? The constant back and forth of ideas.
Great, Gunjan. So I think that's all for today, Gunjan. I really appreciate in such a busy agenda you got. You shared this time with us, and you are always welcome to join in our future sessions here, Gunjan.
Thank you so much, Chris, and same for you. Looking forward to many more conversations with you and exchanging ideas.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.